I always thought I knew what peaceful neighborhood meant. You know, the kind where kids ride bikes without helmets, neighbors wave politely, and the loudest noise on Sunday morning is someone mowing their lawn. My wife and I thought we found that kind of place. We were wrong. At first, everything looked perfect. Tree-lined streets, freshly painted mailboxes, neighbors who smiled just enough to feel safe but not weird. I imagined quiet nights on the porch, weekend barbecues, maybe even joining the HOA if it wasn't too controlling. Little did I know the HOA president had a different plan. Her name? Karen, and Karen didn't enforce rules. Karen created chaos. The first sign of trouble was subtle, a letter about a violation that made no sense. Our mailbox was apparently too far from the curb. I laughed when I showed it to my wife. "Apparently we're criminals now," I joked. She smiled, but her eyes were wary. Something felt off. Then it happened. A knock at the door. Not a friendly neighbor, not a package delivery guy. A man in sunglasses, a fake badge clipped to his belt, and a face that could curdle milk. "Good afternoon," he said in that overdramatic movie cop voice. "I'm here on behalf of the HOA." I blinked. HOA doesn't send cops. He didn't answer. He turned to my wife. "Ma'am, you need to step outside." Before she could respond, smack, he slapped her across the face, hard. Time froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. My mind screamed, did that just happen? She staggered back, rubbing her cheek, and for a second I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was violence over a mailbox. I snapped, "You hit my wife. Get off my property now." He straightened his fake badge and said, "You need to comply with HOA regulations." His tone was smug, like slapping someone made him powerful. I almost laughed, but the anger burned hotter than anything I've ever felt. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. A couple of kids rode their bikes slowly past the street. No one moved. No one helped. It was just us, standing in the doorway, facing a man who had zero authority and zero sense. I could feel my wife's fear, but also her fury. She whispered, "Don't do anything stupid." But her grip on my arm told me she wanted justice. And in that moment I realized something. Karen thought we'd be scared. She thought sending a fake cop would make us bow down. Humor bubbled up despite the chaos. Because seriously, a fake HOA cop slapping someone over lawn rules. What sitcom did I wander into? I calmed myself. I had to think. Calling the police might help, but I needed more than that. I needed strategy. I needed control. "Leave now," I said slowly, letting every word land. "Before things get worse for you." He smirked like he'd done this 100 times. HOA doesn't call the cops. HOA enforces its own rules. I stared at the shiny plastic badge. Not real, just a sticker. And just like that, the fear he hoped to create vanished. I looked at my wife and saw the strength in her eyes, the same fire I felt. We weren't going to back down. And I knew right then that whatever Karen had planned, it was about to backfire. Because in this neighborhood, appearances meant everything. But underneath the manicured lawns and polite smiles, chaos had found a home, and we were standing right in the middle of it. Little did I know, the next 5 minutes would change everything. And by the time it was over, they would be the ones begging me to stop. I could still feel the sting of seeing my wife slapped. My blood was boiling, but I knew I couldn't act recklessly. Not yet. This wasn't just some random guy, it was a fake cop sent by the HOA. And I was starting to realize that Karen, the HOA president, wasn't just petty, she was dangerous. After the man left, still muttering about violations and compliance, I closed the door and locked it, shaking. My wife pressed her hand to her cheek, but she didn't cry. She never cried. Instead, she looked at me with a mix of fear and determination. "We have to do something," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yes, but we have to be smart. This isn't just about a slap. This is a warning." I grabbed my phone and started recording. Every corner of the porch, the doorway, the yard, anything that could serve as evidence. I texted neighbors discreetly, trying to gauge who might have seen the confrontation. Some replied immediately, others were too scared to speak. I understood. This HOA had a reputation. Karen ruled her little empire with intimidation and a sense of untouchable authority. We spent the evening strategizing. We watched the security camera footage and replayed the knock on the door, the fake badge, the slap. My stomach churned, but I noticed something important. He was sloppy. Too focused on looking intimidating, too sure of himself. That mistake, overconfidence, would be his undoing. I decided to pay Karen a visit. Not to fight, not to yell, but to send a clear message. Before we left, I packed my phone, my camera, and just in case, a recorder to capture anything that might happen. As I approached her house, my heart pounded. Karen's home was a pristine two-story display of suburban perfection, flowers, trimmed hedges, a white picket fence. But the air around it felt heavy, almost toxic. I rang the doorbell, no answer. I knocked harder, still nothing. Then out of nowhere, she appeared at the side gate, her face red, her arms flailing. "You, how dare you harass my HOA enforcer?" I stayed calm, keeping my hands visible. "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm simply recording evidence of harassment against my family." She scoffed like she'd heard this excuse 1,000 times. "He's enforcing the rules, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I swallowed my anger. Slapping my wife is nothing. Her eyes widened for a brief second, almost imperceptibly, but then her mouth twisted into that self-righteous smirk she loved. "You'll regret this," she spat. And that's when the real tension started. I could feel her calculating, thinking about her next move. I realized she had probably planned more than one fake cop encounter. More threats, more intimidation. She wasn't just petty, she was relentless. I turned and walked back to my car, my mind racing. I had a plan, but I had to execute it carefully. I couldn't give her the satisfaction of making me react emotionally. I needed strategy. I needed control. Back at home, I reviewed the footage again, frame by frame. I saw the slap in slow motion, the way the fake cop's hand lingered longer than necessary. I noticed his badge, a cheap plastic sticker. I laughed out loud despite myself. This guy was supposed to intimidate us, and he looked like a kid playing dress-up. But the laugh didn't last long. I knew Karen would escalate. I knew she would send more enforcers, more fake cops, maybe even try to corner us inside our own home. And that's when the fear hit me, not for me, but for my wife. She was brave, but she didn't deserve this. No one does. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house, every rustle of leaves outside made me jump. I kept thinking about Karen, about her smug confidence, and about how close she had come to crossing a line I wouldn't forgive. By morning, my decision was made. This wasn't going to escalate silently. Karen had started something, and it was about to backfire in ways she never imagined. I looked at my wife and said, "Today we take control, but we do it smart." Her eyes shone with that same fire I had seen when the slap happened. We were united. And I knew in that moment that whatever came next, the HOA had no idea what they had unleashed. Because sometimes the people who seem powerless, the homeowners, the bystanders, the quiet ones, are the ones who turn the tables. And today we were going to prove it. Karen thought she could scare us. She had no idea that by the end of today, it would be her who was begging for mercy. I could feel the tension in the air before I even stepped outside. The street looked calm, but I knew better. Calm is never real before a storm. My wife walked beside me, silent but steady, her jaw set. Neither of us spoke, because words could betray the storm building inside us both. We spotted him almost immediately, the fake HOA cop. Standing on the curb, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding his eyes, looking like a kid trying way too hard to be scary. Behind him, 2 other neighbors peeked nervously from their windows, too scared to intervene. That's when I realized how much power Karen thought she had, fear, not authority, and she had underestimated us. He saw us and straightened, trying to look intimidating. "You're not supposed to be out here," he barked. "Step aside, sir." I didn't move. "Why, so you can hit my wife again? No thanks." My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of warning. I wasn't yelling, but there was no mistaking the anger beneath it. He took a step closer. "HOA regulations apply to everyone. You will comply." I tilted my head, studying him. He was all bluff. Plastic badge, stiff uniform, trying desperately to look threatening. My fingers itched, not for violence, but for justice. "You've already crossed a line," I said quietly, "and this time I'm ready to hold you accountable." For a moment he froze and I saw it, the first crack in his overconfident act. Then his hand twitched toward his belt like he had a weapon, but he didn't. It was all show, and that was the mistake. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Smile," I said, holding the camera up. "Every move you make is being recorded." His eyes darted nervously. "You can't." I cut him off. "I can and I am, and this isn't just a warning. This is proof of everything you've done, every threat, every slap, every moment you thought you were untouchable." He took another step forward, but I didn't flinch, not once. My wife stood behind me watching, but I could feel her ready to step in if needed. Fear was still there, anger too, but it was controlled. We had the upper hand. "Leave now," I said, voice calm but firm, "before this goes further." And then it happened. He lunged, trying to shove me. Instinctively, I moved aside, and he stumbled forward onto the curb, almost tripping. My wife gasped, and the neighbors peeked closer, whispers floating down the street. For a split second, I thought maybe he would regain control. But then hesitation hit him. Confusion, panic. The act was over. He had no real authority. He was just a man trying to pretend he had power. And I realized Karen had sent someone completely unprepared to handle a real confrontation. I stayed calm, letting the silence stretch. He swallowed hard. You can't do this," he stammered. "I already am," I said, "and the more you resist, the worse it will look for you." Then the most beautiful moment of the confrontation happened. My wife stepped forward. Her voice was low, steady, and full of quiet fire. "You hit me once. You will never do it again, not in this house, not in this street, not anywhere." I looked at her and felt a surge of pride and love. She wasn't just my wife, she was a force. Together, we were unstoppable. The man's face paled. I could see it, the fear, the realization that he was outmatched not by violence but by confidence and control. And that's when it hit me. Karen hadn't sent enforcers. She had sent people she thought were scared. People who would back down, people who could be broken by a single display of calm determination. I raised my phone again. "One more word, one more move, and everything you do will be public. Every slap, every threat, it's all going online." He backed off, his swagger gone. Sweat formed at his temples, and that's when I knew the next 5 minutes would decide everything. He was vulnerable, unprepared, and completely exposed. I looked at my wife. She nodded, silent agreement. We weren't done yet, but the first blow had been struck. And when Karen realized her fake cop couldn't handle us, well, that's when things would really start to unravel. By the time this was over, the man who hit my wife would be begging me to stop. And Karen had no idea what was coming next. After the confrontation on the street, I knew one thing for certain. Karen and her fake cops were not going to stop. If anything, they would escalate. But this time, we were ready. My wife and I sat down in the quiet of our living room, the tension still clinging to us like smoke. Every creak in the house, every rustle outside made me jump. But fear had shifted. Now it fueled strategy, not panic. I pulled out my phone and began reviewing the footage I had captured. The slap, the fake badge, the man's stiff, overconfident posture, all of it was evidence. But I knew just recording it wasn't enough. We needed more. I needed to anticipate their next move, and I needed proof that couldn't be ignored. I turned to my wife. "We're not just documenting this," I said. "We're building a case, and we're going to make sure Karen regrets ever sending someone to touch you." She nodded, her jaw tight with determination. "What's the plan?" I outlined it carefully. Cameras on the porch, motion sensors at the doors, audio recorders hidden in obvious places. Things that would make anyone attempting intimidation look foolish on video. Every detail mattered. Every angle could be the one that broke her credibility. Humor helped me think clearly. I laughed quietly to myself. Because really, who gets threatened by someone wearing a plastic badge and sunglasses indoors? It was absurd, but the danger was real, and that absurdity made me focus. Then came the neighborhood strategy. I discreetly reached out to neighbors I trusted. A few were scared at first, fearful of Karen's wrath, but when I showed them the video, their eyes widened. "She actually sent someone to slap your wife?" one whispered. "I thought she was exaggerating." No exaggeration. This was real. And now, allies were starting to appear where I least expected them. A couple of neighbors agreed to quietly observe Karen's next moves, others offered to capture footage from their homes. Slowly, the tide was shifting. Karen had underestimated the community's willingness to protect itself. As night fell, my wife and I set up our defenses. Cameras, lights, and even decoy signs. Smile, you're being recorded, strategically placed to unnerve any would-be enforcers. Every step was deliberate, designed to make Karen's team feel watched, even before she realized it. I kept thinking about that slap, replaying the moment over and over. Anger bubbled inside me, but I harnessed it. I turned that anger into focus. Karen had made a critical error. She assumed fear would win. She assumed we would react emotionally, but we were calm, deliberate, and prepared. And the most satisfying part? The fake cop had no idea he was being outplayed. He thought he had power. He thought intimidation worked. But he had no strategy, no backup plan, no understanding that real power comes from knowledge and preparation. My wife sat beside me quiet, but I could feel her energy. She was ready for whatever came next. And that's when I realized something critical. We weren't just fighting back. We were reclaiming control of our lives, our home, and our peace of mind. By the time we went to bed, I felt a strange calm. Fear hadn't vanished, but it had been replaced by resolve. Karen thought she could bully us. She thought a slap and a badge would keep us quiet. She didn't realize she had just set the stage for her own humiliation. As I drifted off to sleep, I could imagine her waking up the next day, confident, plotting her next move. What she wouldn't know was that we had anticipated it all. Every trick, every bluff, every attempt to scare us. We were ready. Tomorrow would be the day we took the first real step. The confrontation was coming to a head, and this time we weren't just reacting. We were acting. We were in control. And the best part? Karen had no idea that the people she thought were scared were about to turn the tables completely. She thought she could keep us in fear. She didn't realize that by the end of the day, it would be her team begging us to stop. The next morning, I could feel it in the air. Something was about to happen. Karen never hesitated when it came to intimidation, and I knew she wouldn't sit quietly after our little stand the day before. I checked the cameras one more time, making sure every angle was covered, every blind spot minimized. My wife and I moved with deliberate calm, like predators ready for the hunt, even though our hearts were racing. I stepped outside and immediately saw him, the fake HOA cop. He was standing in the street, trying to look confident again, but this time his confidence was brittle. A little wobble in his posture gave him away. I had never felt such a rush of anticipation. Finally, he would have to face the consequences of his own actions. He tried to sound authoritative. "You need to comply," he barked. "Now, this is your final warning." I didn't move, I didn't flinch. Instead, I let my calmness speak for itself. "Final warning? You hit my wife, you embarrassed yourself. Compliance isn't a choice anymore, it's exposure. Every move you make, we're recording." I could see him hesitate. Panic flickered across his face for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. Then unexpectedly, one of the neighbors emerged from their driveway. A man I barely knew, but who had seen everything the day before, gave a slow nod to me and raised his phone. The fake cop stiffened, his eyes darting nervously. He realized he was surrounded by witnesses now. People who had been terrified before were no longer hiding. I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "You think a badge, plastic or not, gives you power? You're pathetic. And your boss, Karen, she's about to find out just how pathetic you look when someone stands up to her." He took a step back. Sweat formed at his temples. I could see it, the bravado collapsing, replaced by fear. And then it happened. He lunged forward, maybe hopping to intimidate, maybe hoping I'd react with violence. But I was ready, calm, collected. I moved aside effortlessly, letting him stumble forward, almost tripping over the curb. The neighbors gasped quietly, some whispering to each other, hidden cameras capturing everything. I raised my phone again, recording every flinch, every twitch. "This is going online," I said, voice steady, almost casual. "Everything you do, everything you think is clever, it's all public record. And by the way, people hate bullies." I could see the realization hitting him. For the first time, he understood that he was completely exposed. That badge, that swagger, that authority Karen had lent him, none of it meant a thing. Then my wife stepped forward. Her eyes were blazing with fury, her voice low but cutting. "You will never touch me again. Not my home, not my life, not anywhere. And if you try, every person on this street will see the truth." The fake cop froze. The neighbors behind their curtains and fences were silent, watching this quiet but undeniable display of power. And in that moment, the tables began to turn. Karen's pawn realized he wasn't the one in control. We were. The calm, the evidence, the strategy, all of it combined into something he couldn't overcome. Fear replaced intimidation. Panic replaced swagger. And I knew right then the moment of victory was approaching. I didn't need to act with violence. I didn't need to shout. Every measured word, every steady step, every piece of evidence I held made him crumble. And as he backed away, his fake badge glinting in the sun, I could see the thought forming in his mind. I should have stayed home. I should have never come here. This wasn't the end. Karen would still try to fight. Her ego wouldn't allow her to admit defeat so easily. But the first blow had been struck. The first crack had formed in her facade, and by the time she realized what was happening, it might already be too late. I glanced at my wife. She gave me a small, tense smile, her eyes shining with quiet pride. We were standing together, and the first round was ours. The fake cop finally turned and ran. Well, as much as a man humiliated in broad daylight can run, and I knew Karen would be next. She thought sending a fake cop would scare us. She had no idea that her empire of fear was about to collapse, and that the next move would leave her begging for mercy. By the time the fake cop ran off down the street, my chest was pounding, not with fear, but with adrenaline and controlled fury. Karen had thought she could intimidate us, bully my wife, and make us bow. Instead, her plan had exploded in her face. I glanced at my wife. Her hand found mine, fingers tight, and I felt the weight of what we had just accomplished. Not a single punch thrown, no shouting, just calm, strategy, and presence of mind. But we weren't done, not even close. I knew Karen would react immediately. She would rally whatever enforcers she could and try again. And that's when it hit me. We needed to escalate before she did. I grabbed my phone and started live streaming the scene to a small group of neighbors who had agreed to watch for us. Even if Karen tried to deny it, the evidence would speak for itself. Every moment we captured, every flinch, every step, every glare would show the world exactly who she really was. Within minutes, I could see the shift. Neighbors started coming outside, slowly, cautiously, but they were coming. They weren't just witnesses anymore, they were allies. And once they realized we weren't afraid, Karen's little army of fear began to crumble. I turned back to the street. The fake cop had disappeared, but his panic lingered like a shadow. I knew Karen would be watching from her window, calculating her next move, unaware that she had just handed me the advantage. Then it happened. A new figure emerged from a side street, another so-called HOA enforcer trying to play tough, walking with purpose as if he was in control. I could see the hesitation in his step, the fear flickering behind the sunglasses. He had already heard about what had happened with the first one. I raised my phone and said calmly, "This is your only warning. Stop. Turn around and go home. Otherwise, every move you make is being recorded and will be shared with everyone here. You think this is a small violation, it's evidence of harassment, and everyone will see it." He stopped dead, sweat glistened on his forehead. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He realized that he wasn't stepping into control, he was stepping into exposure. And then my wife spoke, her voice steady, firm, unyielding. "You will not touch us, you will not threaten us. Leave now." It was like a switch flipped. The second enforcer panicked, turned on his heel, and bolted. I could feel a thrill of satisfaction, but I didn't celebrate. I had to maintain control. This was bigger than ego. It was about exposing Karen's entire operation. From her porch, a muffled yell. Karen's voice cut through the street. "Stop, you can't do this, you're making a scene." I smiled faintly, keeping my voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're not making a scene. You made a scene when you sent men to hit my wife. And now everyone is watching. And Karen, everyone sees the truth." Her face appeared at the window, red with rage, mouth moving as she tried to yell, but I could see panic creeping in. Her empire of control, built on fear and fake authority, was cracking in real time. and she had no idea how badly she had miscalculated. I looked at my wife again. She nodded ever so slightly. We didn't need to raise our voices. We didn't need to fight. The calm, the evidence, and the courage we displayed were doing all the work. The fake cops, the threats, the intimidation, they were powerless now. Even the neighbors, who had been terrified for months, began whispering to each other, stepping onto their lawns, filming from their porches. Corinne's carefully curated image of control was collapsing. And then it hit me, we weren't just defending ourselves anymore. We were turning the tables completely. The ones who thought they had power, the ones who had tried to bully, humiliate, and intimidate, they were now the ones begging, panicking, and exposed. I could almost hear Corinne screaming at them, "Stop, stop, do whatever they say." That was it, the tide had turned. The fake cops were terrified, Corinne was furious, and we were calm. Our strategy, patience, and courage had done something more powerful than any fight could have. It had broken their control completely. They thought they were untouchable. 5 minutes ago, they slapped my wife. 5 minutes later, they were the ones begging me to stop. And Corinne had no idea what was coming next. By the time the sun reached its peak, I knew it was time. Corinne had to be confronted directly. The fake cops were gone, humiliated, trembling, begging for mercy, and the neighbors had begun whispering, some filming everything, some watching from the safety of their yards. But Corinne, she was still lurking, still scheming, still thinking she could regain control. I walked up to her house, my wife beside me, steady and unshakable. Every step felt heavy with anticipation. The street seemed quieter, but that was just the calm before the storm. I could feel the tension in the air, like electricity before a lightning strike. Corinne appeared on her porch, her face red, her eyes wild, trying to look authoritative, but the panic betrayed her. You can't do this. Stop this immediately," she yelled, waving her arms like a conductor of chaos. I took a deep breath, calm, collected, the same calm I had relied on the entire day. "Stop what? Exposing the truth, making sure people see what happens when you abuse power." My voice was steady, carrying just enough weight that even she felt it. She hissed, "You have no idea what you're dealing with." I shook my head. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. I dealt with your fake cops. I dealt with your threats. I dealt with your little games. And now it's time for you to deal with the consequences." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I could see the gears turning in her mind, panic setting in as she realized her carefully curated image of control was collapsing. Every neighbor watching, every phone recording, every word spoken was evidence. Every lie, every intimidation tactic, it all crumbled in real time. I stepped closer, my phone raised, capturing the moment. "Do you see this?" I said, voice steady, loud enough for everyone watching to hear. "This is what happens when you cross boundaries. This is what happens when you think fear gives you power. And Corinne, everyone knows now." Her face twisted with rage, but the fear was undeniable. She knew she was exposed. She knew she had lost. And for the first time, I saw her vulnerability. She wasn't the untouchable HOA queen. She was a woman terrified that her empire of intimidation had failed. Then with a small, almost imperceptible sigh, she realized the extent of her defeat. "Fine," she shouted, trying to regain control. "Fine, I give up. Stop recording. Stop." I smiled faintly, letting the calm authority in my stance do the rest. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to threaten. The power had shifted entirely. She was begging now, begging for us to stop exposing her, begging for the humiliation to end. Her fake cops had been nothing. Her threats had been nothing. And now she stood on her porch, powerless, while the neighbors whispered, filming and witnessing the collapse of her rule. I glanced at my wife, who gave me a small, triumphant nod. She had been the strength beside me, the quiet fire that fueled our strategy. Together, we had turned fear into courage, intimidation into evidence, and chaos into control. Corinne finally stepped back into her house, slamming the door, and I knew she had lost. Not just the battle, but the neighborhood's respect, her reputation, and her sense of control. Every threat, every slap, every fake cop had backfired spectacularly. I turned to the neighbors watching, and with a small, calm gesture I said, "We didn't need violence. We didn't need anger. We just needed truth, courage, and strategy. That's all it takes to stand up to people who think they're untouchable. The tension lingered for a moment longer, then dissipated. The fake cops wouldn't return. Karen wouldn't dare escalate further. The street was quiet again, but this time it was real peace. And for the first time, I realized that we had done more than just defend ourselves. We had exposed the truth, reclaimed our home, and reminded everyone that fear is only powerful when you let it be. Karen thought she could rule through fear. She thought a slap and a fake badge would keep us silent. By the end of the day, it was her who was begging, and we learned something crucial. No fake cop, no HOA president ever controls us if we refuse to be afraid. The next morning felt different. The sun was shining on the street, the same quiet suburban calm as before, but this time it was real. Karen was nowhere to be seen. The fake cops had vanished, humiliated and defeated. For the first time, the neighborhood felt safe, like we had reclaimed it, not with violence, not with anger, but with courage and strategy. I walked outside with my wife, hand in hand. Neighbors peeked from their windows and lawns, some smiling, some shaking their heads in disbelief at what had happened. Whispers of "I can't believe she sent someone to slap them" floated through the air. Even those who had been too scared to intervene before were now walking a little taller, inspired by what had unfolded. It hit me then, this wasn't just about my wife and me. This was about everyone who had lived in fear of Karen's petty tyrannies. Every garden rule, every mailbox measurement, every arbitrary fine, it had all been part of her illusion of control. And today, that illusion was shattered. Neighbors began approaching, cautiously at first, then with smiles and words of gratitude. "Thank you for standing up," one said. "I've been terrified to speak out, but now I feel like we can breathe again." My wife squeezed my hand. Her cheek still bore a faint red mark from the slap, but her eyes shone brighter than ever. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and triumph. We didn't just defend ourselves, we exposed the truth. We showed them that fear only works if you let it. Karen, of course, never made another move. Her reign of intimidation had ended not with a lawsuit, not with threats, but with reality. The whole neighborhood had seen her for what she really was, petty, vindictive, and powerless when faced with people who refused to be afraid. Later that day, I uploaded the footage I had captured, the slap, the confrontation, the panic of her fake enforcers, to a private group of neighbors. It spread quietly at first, then faster than I expected. People were talking, laughing at the absurdity, yes, but also relieved that the neighborhood's tyrant had finally been exposed. I realized something important. Standing up doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means patience, strategy, and courage. Letting the truth speak louder than threats, letting the calm power of confidence and evidence replace fear. That was how we had won. In the following weeks, life returned to a semblance of normal. Children played outside freely again. Neighbors waved without hesitation. The mailboxes stayed in place, the hedges trimmed at will, and for the first time in months, the HOA felt like it was just a group of people managing a community, not running a small empire of fear. Karen, she quietly stopped appearing at neighborhood meetings. I heard rumors she had tried to regain control, but everyone ignored her. The fake cops, they never came back. Their humiliation had ensured that. And my wife, she laughed again freely without fear, and I felt a surge of pride for the strength she had shown. I learned that day, and I hope everyone watching this does too, that standing up to fear isn't always about confrontation. Sometimes it's about strategy, patience, and unwavering courage. Sometimes the quiet ones, the ones who refuse to be intimidated, are the ones who change everything. As I looked down the street, seeing neighbors chatting, kids riding bikes, and the sunlight reflecting off freshly painted mailboxes, I felt a calm satisfaction. We had defended our home. We had defended our peace. And we had reminded everyone, especially Karen, that no amount of fear, intimidation, or fake authority can ever overcome truth and courage. Finally, my wife leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "We're safe now." And I knew she was right. The HOA had tried to break us, tried to scare us, tried to humiliate us. But in the end, it was them who were begging, them who were exposed, them who were powerless. And for once, the neighborhood could breathe and truly, finally live in peace. No one, no fake cop, no tyrant, no fear can control you if you refuse to be afraid. Sometimes, standing up quietly, calmly, and smartly is the most powerful thing you can do. And that's exactly what we did. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.